Hi, hello and welcome back to F1 Challenge VB. My name is Mephisto and our epic journey through the history of Formula 1 continues today with the opening round of the 1955 season, the Argentine Grand Prix. But first, I'd like to say thank you to all who took part in the straw poll. I know I say this every time, but it really helps me gauge how interested you are in these videos and the series overall. Now I know that not everyone is interested in controlling Andy's fate, and that's okay. I can understand that. As such, I would also like to thank anyone who watches my videos. I really appreciate that people are taking time out of their busy schedule to watch these videos. It's quite humbling. With that said, let's take a quick look at the poll results. Just like last time, there were a total of 49 votes sent in. Now, to break it all down, the Belgian national team and Jose Froilan Gonzalez's Ferrari received no votes. Connaught, Alberto Uria Racing and the Ferrari 555 each received 1 vote. Maserati and the Ferrari 625 received 2 votes each. Sterling Moss Limited and Simca Gordini received 4 votes each. Cooper received 5 votes. Lancia and Mercedes both got 7 votes. But the clear winner was Van Wall with a total of 15 votes. So that is the team we will be driving for this season, and I will be replacing Ken Wharton as the second driver. So, once again, thank you to all who took part in the poll, and thank you to everyone else who watches these videos. It wouldn't be the same without you. Now, on to the main event. A look at the 1955 season, and unlike in previous seasons, I will talk in more detail about this season because, well, there is a lot to cover. So the season started on the 16th of January and was supposed to last until December, but was cut short and ended on the 23rd of October, due to an event I'll be talking about in more detail in a minute. The season was made up of 23 races. There were supposed to be 27 actually. 16 of these races were non-championship events and the other 7 were part of the World Championship. The driver's title was awarded to Juan Manuel Fangio, who won 4 of the 7 races. This was his second win in a row and his third title in all, making Fangio the most successful driver at the time and the first and only driver to claim 3 world titles. He scored a total of 40 points during the course of the season, or 41 if we are to include the dropped points. Sterling Moss finished the season in second, scoring 23 points, and Eugenio Castellotti took the third spot. He scored 12 points. Now, before I get to the main event, I want to talk about a few more things. First, this season was a bit unusual in that it was the first in quite a few seasons to feature not only Formula 1 spec cars, but also Formula 2 spec cars, which I find is quite an interesting idea. As such, I'm looking forward to seeing how the season unfolds, especially since we don't have the fastest of cars. The second thing I want to talk about is the return of the Monaco Grand Prix to the F1 calendar. It was missing in the past 4 seasons. It made its appearance in the inaugural Formula 1 World Championship season in 1950, but it was taken off the calendar after that. Luckily, it was brought back in 1955 and it was here to stay. The 1955 Monaco Grand Prix is most famous for Alberto Ascari's accident when he drove his Lancia into the bay. Emergency crews quickly took him out of the water. He was wet and cold, but thankfully was otherwise unharmed. Unfortunately, he lost his life 4 days later at Monza, where he was testing a new sports car developed by Lancia, which they planned on revealing later on in the season. He died whilst approaching the high-speed Via Leone corner when his car went wide and crashed. The corner would later be renamed after him. The drama didn't stop there, however. 2 weeks after the Monaco Grand Prix was the Indianapolis 500, where Manny Aiulo lost his life during practice and the previous Indy 500 champion Bill Vukovich died in the race. After all this, one would think that things couldn't get any worse. Unfortunately, the 1955 season was far from over, and it would claim many more lives in a catastrophe that would echo through time, the effects of which we can feel to this day. It would become the biggest disaster in motorsports history. At the beginning of this section, I've mentioned that the 1955 season was supposed to last until December, but was cut short and ended in October. That is because there were supposed to be 11 rounds in the championship, but unfortunately, only 7 of them were held. This was thanks to one single event, an event that was held on the 11th of June. This was the 1955 24 Hours of Le Mans, which was part of the World Sports Car Championship. This would evolve into the FIA World GT Championship by the late 80s. The race started at 4 p.m. on Saturday. Fangio was driving a Mercedes 300 SLR. Hawthorn was in an all-new Jaguar D-Type, being the only car to feature at the time state-of-the-art brake discs. All the other cars were relying on drum brakes, and in the case of the 300 SLR, they also used a huge spoiler that would deploy in order to help the car slow down more effectively. The other main characters of the story were Lance Macklin driving an Austin Healey 100 and Pierre Levey, who, like Fangio, was driving a Mercedes 300 SLR. It was 6:26 p.m. at the end of lap 35 when the tragedy took place. Fangio and Hawthorn were in the lead and were constantly swapping places and posting new track records with every single lap. On lap 34, the Jaguar team signaled Hawthorn to come in for a pit stop. The race order at this point was Fangio in the lead, Hawthorn in second, Macklin third, and behind him was Levey, who was one lap behind. Towards the end of lap 35, as Hawthorn was preparing to pit, he decided to take advantage of his superior braking power and broke as late as possible in order to minimize the time he spent in the pits. It is important to note that the circuit did not have a slowdown lane. As such, drivers would often brake just before their pit boxes in order to stop. So, it's the end of lap 45. Hawthorn raises his hand to signal to Macklin, who was behind him, that he is about to pit. Macklin was apparently caught off guard by the Jaguar's sudden loss of speed, so he swerved left in order to avoid a collision with the Jaguar. Behind Macklin was Levey in the Mercedes, and although he was a lap down, his car was much faster than Macklin's Austin Healey. Levey, surprised by this sudden change of direction, had no time to react and crashed into the back of the Healey. His car ramped off the back of the Austin Healey, which flew into the earthen embankment, which was the only thing separating the spectators from the cars. Levey was thrown out of the Mercedes, landed on his head, and died instantly. His car, after hitting the embankment, careened into the grandstand. The heavier parts of the car, like the engine, front suspension, and radiator, were detached from the car and were carried by the momentum into the onlooking spectators. The bonnet of the car, hood, also detached and flew into the crowd, decapitating some of the spectators. When the Mercedes landed, its fuel tank erupted and burst into flames. This is important because the chassis of the car was made out of a magnesium alloy called electron. If you've paid any attention in chemistry class, you'll know that magnesium has a lower melting point than other metals. This means that in no time at all, the car was burning white hot. Unfortunately, the firefighters present there did not know about the magnesium alloy chassis and so attempted to put out the flames using water-based fire extinguishers. Why is this important, you ask? Because water and magnesium-based fires don't mix well. If you want to know what happens when you pour water onto magnesium fire, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that showcase this. Suffice to say that the reaction is very violent. Unfortunately, this only added to the disaster. Fire was so violent that it took until midnight to entirely put out the flames. Anyway, whilst this was unfolding, Peter Fitch, who was Levey's relief driver, along with Levey's wife, were watching on in terror from the other side of the road. The race unfortunately was never stopped, and according to the owners of the track, they did this because they were afraid that if they did, everyone would want to leave the area immediately, and this would slow down the emergency rescue workers. Meanwhile, back in the pits, Fitch realized that if Mercedes were to continue racing, it would be a huge PR disaster and could lead to Mercedes being forced to shut down their factories. After all, this was just 10 years after World War II, and most of Europe was still pretty salty about what the Germans did to them. And even an event like this could trigger a negative reaction. So Fitch went over to the Mercedes garage and told Alfred Neubauer that it would be best if he brought in all his cars. Neubauer agreed, but unfortunately he did not have the authority to make such a call. Neubauer, together with the rest of the Mercedes team, attempted to call the Mercedes representatives. However, they were scattered across Europe and were pretty difficult to find. Luckily, after enough phone calls, a board meeting was held by the higher-ups at Mercedes, and by midnight instructed Neubauer to call in all of his drivers. By morning, the Mercedes team was gone. As a result of this tragic accident, 84 people, including Pierre Levey, lost their lives. Another 150 to 170 people were injured. Initially, no one was accused for causing the accident, but eventually the French press, along with Lance Macklin, said that Hawthorn was to blame, stating that he should have not braked so suddenly. On the other hand, Hawthorn threw the blame on Macklin and Levey, arguing that neither of them were qualified or prepared to drive such powerful cars. The blame was also directed at the circuit itself, which was virtually the same as it was when it first opened back in 1923, when the top speeds of cars only reached 100 km per hour or 62 miles per hour. But by 1955, the biggest of the cars, such as the Mercedes and Jaguar, could reach speeds in excess of 270 kph or 170 miles per hour. This incident also had an immediate impact, with a lot of races being cancelled in all motorsport series, but our main focus is Formula 1, so I'm only going to mention the races that were cancelled in F1, and they were the French, German, Spanish and Swiss Grand Prix. Eventually, France, Germany, Spain and Switzerland decided to ban races altogether, along with Belgium and Italy. However, the ban was lifted quickly in most countries, except for Spain and Switzerland. Later, Spain lifted the ban as well. However, Switzerland never did, and in fact the ban is still in use today. There were attempts to appeal the ban, however they were all denied. The latest such appeal was made very recently, more precisely in 2015, and this time the appeal was partially successful in that the Swiss government agreed to relax the ban a bit. As a result, it is now legal to organize races in Switzerland, but only racing series that use electric cars are allowed. So you might be able to see a Formula E race in Switzerland, but not much else. Although I think there are some LMP cars that are fully electric, so those should qualify as well. Anyway, it took quite a long time to get through all that. I'm sorry if I ruined your day with this quite honestly sad story, but I had to talk about it. After all, it is the greatest tragedy in motorsports history, and to go through the 1955 season and not talk about the Le Mans disaster would be a crime. This day shall forever live in infamy, and we should never forget the events that took place on the 11th of June 1955, and we should never forget the 84 people that lost their lives on that fateful day. For if we do, we are bound to repeat the same mistakes, and such a tragedy should never have to happen again. Thank you to all who took their time to sit through all of that and didn't just skip straight to the race and or the end of the video. With all that said, we can now start the video proper. The first championship race of the season was the Argentine Grand Prix, which was held on the 16th of January. It had 21 entries, all of them taking part in the race, but 14 ending up having to retire. The race consisted of 96 laps completed in 3 hours and 38 seconds. The lineup at the start of the race saw Gonzalez on pole, Ascari second, Fangio third, Berra fourth and Farina fifth. Fangio won the race. Gonzalez gave his car to Farina, who later gave it to Trintignant, who eventually finished in second, 1 minute 29.6 seconds behind Fangio. Maglioli finished in third, he was 2 laps down. Hans Hermann gave his car to Kling, who in turn gave it to Moss, who finished the race in fourth, he was also 2 laps down. And rounding off the top 5 was Roberto Mieres, he was 5 laps adrift. The fastest time of the race was posted on lap 45, it was a 1 minute 48.3 second lap, and it was posted by Juan Manuel Fangio. So we're back in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The track was reversed to its original clockwise heading, and the lap starts off with a long run down into turn 1, a long right-hander that tightens towards the end, so you must pay attention to your speed. Next is turn 2, another high-speed right-hander. Watch your speed as you crest the hill at the corner exit, which can launch you into the air, causing you to miss the braking point for turn 3, a right-hand hairpin, which leads into a left-right chicane, which itself leads into a slow double apex left-hand corner. Turns 7 and 8 are next. Careful as you exit turn 7 because you are going downhill at this point, and if you're not careful you can go wide. This is followed by another right-hand hairpin. This brings us into the final corner of the track, a high-speed left-hander. This in turn brings us around and back onto the main straight, and that is a lap around the Buenos Aires circuit. So here we are in qualifying, coming around to set our first lap, a 1:43.43. Not good but not bad, considering Menditegoy posted a 1:41 and later we posted a 1:42.47. Not as good because Ascari managed to post a 1:39, so not bad, but not good, but not as bad as we would have done in the Mercedes in last season. Anyway, here are the previous Argentine Grand Prix winners. Not many because there only been 2 Grand Prix, but anyway, here is the grid walkthrough. We have Mas on pole with Castellotti in second, Nino Farina third, Trintignant fourth, and Roberto Mieres rounding off the top 5. Next we have Piero Taruffi in 6th, Juan Manuel Fangio 7th, 8th is Jean Berra, 9th Carl Kling, Luigi Mussa is 10th, and then in 11th we have Paul Ferrer in the Ferrari, followed by Jose Froilan Gonzalez in 12th, 13th is Alberto Ascari in the Lancia, Perdisa is 14th, Hans Hermann 15th, Menditego is 16th, Sergio Mantovani 17th, Andy Higgs is down in 18th, followed by Harry Schell in 19th, Birger is 20th, Luis Chiron 21st, 22nd is Mike Hawthorn, followed by Umberto Maglioli in 23rd, 24th Luigi Villoresi, Eli Bayol 25th, 26th is Jack Brabham, 27th Iglesias, Alberto Uria is 28th, 29th is Jack Fairman, Paul Walker is 30th, 31st is Johnny Claes, and Jack Swatters is 32nd. Yes, 32 cars on the grid this season, as you saw, the track isn't quite suited for 32 cars, as no, the last 2 cars weren't on the track, they were actually on the pit lane. But anyway, we are off, and that was a pretty terrible start, but it's going to be an interesting season to see what we can do among 32 other cars, especially since there are both Formula 1 and Formula 2 cars, as I stated in the intro, well, in the season presentation. As we now come into turn 1, I've lost a couple of positions, but we managed to make up a few more, well, not a few more, but get back into 18th, then eventually into 16th, as we saw a few cars lose control through turn 1 there. And now we have another look at the start. Again, a kind of slow on my end, but eventually we get going, and Mike Hawthorn there made contact with one of the Ferraris, I believe, and they kind of spun, but they are still in the race as of for the moment at least. But and here we come into turn 1, trying to avoid more carnage, and this is Maurice Trintignant, who loses control of his Ferrari. He tries to get turn around and drive straight into the Mercedes, which was going in the correct direction, and loses his front wheel, and he's out of the race. And next we have Carl Klink, who goes wide, then under the grandstands, and loses his front wheel. Then on lap 2, yes, Mike Hawthorn lost control of his car and crashed and lost his front wheel. Also on lap 2, Juan Manuel Fangio lost control of his car, drove under the grandstands. He escaped kind of unscathed, although he did do a few flips, and decided that he had more than enough of the race. On lap 3, Luigi Villoresi went a bit wide through the second chicane and crashed into an invisible wall, I guess, and lost his front wheel. Perdisa did the same also on lap 3, ended up under the grandstands, and then drove into the cameraman post there and flipped his car over. Later still, Sterling Moss on lap 4 crashed into the invisible wall and lost his rear left wheel. Next we have Menditegoy on lap 5, who also crashed into whatever is there that causes cars to lose their wheels, and those were the first 5 laps, and I'm going to do it this way because there are a lot of cars. I'm expecting a lot of retirements, and this is going to make the videos slightly shorter and easier to watch. So on lap 6 we see Jesus Iglesias, who loses control of his Simca when he makes contact with the Ferrari and flips over and decides that he had more than enough of the race. Also on lap 6, Eli Bayol crashes into one of the Ferraris, loses control. He tries to get back on track, however he for some reason doesn't know that he should go a little bit more to the left, drives into the cameraman's post, and he is out of the race. Hans Hermann, also on lap 6, went wide through the chicane, crashed into the invisible wall, down into the grandstand and lost his front wheel, and he's out of the race. Louis Chiron on lap 8 crashed into the back of the grandstand, and that was it for his race. This is Fairman in the Connaught, who loses control of his car on lap 7. Mantovani lap 8, he was 1 lap behind, loses control of his Maserati, and here we see speed up, eventually crashes into the tree, and he is out of the race. This is Eugenio Castellotti on lap 9, who crashes into the Connaught and loses his front left wheel. So those are the next retirements. As we start lap 10, Nino Farina tangles there with the blue Ferrari, and we manage to take the lead of the Argentine Grand Prix, which is quite interesting. Then on lap 11, Paul Frere lost control of his Maserati, and actually a Ferrari 555, and crashed into the grandstand. So did Piero Taruffi, and he's also out of the race. Next we have Gonzalez in the blue Ferrari, who crashed into Peter Walker's Sterling Moss Limited, and he's out of the race. And this is actually Peter Walker, who loses control of the car, drives into one of the pit garages, and loses his wheel. On lap 13, the Equipe Nationale Belgique crashes into me and forces I lose control of the car and drive into this tree. Luckily my car is intact, so I can continue my race. This is Jean Berra on lap 16, who loses control of his Maserati, turns around, and as we saw previously, he will drive into the cameraman's post, gets stuck, and he is out of the race. Lap 19, Johnny Claes in the Equipe Nationale Belgique drives under the grandstands on the main straight, and something happens to him. Then on lap 20, try to get around that car in front of me. He was 1 lap behind, but for some reason whoever is in the car decided that they wanted that part of the circuit where I was trying to lap them, and we crashed, and luckily my car is still intact. But on lap 20, Alberto Ascari loses control of his Lancia, crashes into the grandstand, flips his car over, and decides that he had more than enough. Alberto Uria, and I think it was Alberto Uria who I crashed into, also loses control of his car, drives under the grandstands and gets stuck. He is out of the race as well. Harry Schell loses control of his Maserati and crashes into the invisible wall, loses his front left wheel, and is out of the race. Luigi Musso on lap 21 decides to see what's under the grandstands and tries to get back onto the track, hits an invisible wall, and he is out of the race. Jack Brabham, lap 21 as well, drives into that invisible wall at the end of the second chicane, and he is out of the race. Lap 23, for some reason, Nino Farina decides to stop in the middle of the road. I crash into him. He gets stuck under the cameraman's post, and he is out of the race. And this is Birger coming into the pits. He ran out of fuel and he is out of the race. And finally we have Jack Waters, who also runs out of fuel just before the pit entrance. So that's 30 cars retiring from the race, and here is another look at what Farina did. He, for no reason whatsoever, decided to stop there. I don't think he ran out of fuel. He could have gone for it. I don't know. I really have no words for what happened there. But we ended up crashing into Nino Farina and he is out of the race, and my car became very difficult to drive afterwards. But eventually we come around to finish lap 33 and take the win at the Argentine Grand Prix. Umberto Maglioli managed to finish the race in second, 2 laps behind, and that means 6 points for him. And Nino Farina, despite retiring, managed to post the fastest lap of the race, which is actually about 5 seconds slower than the track record. And here is the long list of retirements. 2 people out of 32 drivers managed to complete the 33 laps of the Argentine Grand Prix, so a lot of retirements. This is going to be a very interesting season, I believe. But yeah, after a very appalling 1954 season, it seems that Van Wall will be the team that might not bring us the glory we saw in previous seasons, but might help us score a few points here and there along the season, which would be very, very nice to see. But anyway, here are the career statistics, and this was Andy's 43rd Grand Prix. His best start is from first, has 3 pole positions, has posted 8 fastest laps. His best finishes from first, has completed 27 races, 25 of which in the points, has won 15 races, 2 of them at the Indianapolis 500, no wins at Monaco yet, has 3 championships under his belt, has scored a total of 165 points, has retired 16 times, has experienced 878 laps out of a total of 1170 laps, has 5 bronze trophies, 2 silver trophies, 15 gold trophies, and as an extension 15 podiums. And here is a quick look at the championship standings. Obviously Andy is in the lead, Maglioli second, and Nino Farina has 1 point thanks to the fact that he posted the fastest lap of the race. No one else has points, although Waters and Birger occupy the 4th and 5th spot in the standings at the moment. So an interesting race, and I feel that this is going to be a very interesting season. Our next race is the Monaco Grand Prix, which returns after a 4-year absence, and I'm very stoked about it. I really felt that it was missing, so it's quite a relief to see it back on the calendar. Anyway, I'm sorry that the video turned out to be this long, but again, I couldn't bring myself to go through the 1955 season and not mention the Le Mans disaster. Even though it wasn't part of Formula 1, it affected Formula 1 and every other racing series of the time. This tragedy never should have happened. And as Jackie Stewart once said in an interview, and I quote, "As racing drivers, we are well aware of the risks involved in motor racing, and we are willing to take these risks. However, it is unacceptable that an innocent bystander, who is only there to watch the race, lose his life due to a mistake made by a driver." Well, I don't think it is a word-for-word quote, but I think the idea is still there. Thanks to Jackie Stewart's insistence, Formula 1 and motor racing as a whole did eventually become much safer. Unfortunately for the 84 people who lost their lives at the Le Mans disaster, these changes would come too little too late. Once again, thank you if you sat through the entire video. I'm sorry it turned out this long, but I felt that I had to do it. Anyway, you can start voting for next season's team, link is in the description. I also have a second channel where I will be playing all sorts of different games. Right now I'm making a playthrough of the original Need for Speed Underground, so if you want to check it out, there is a link to that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, stay sharp.